مساء الخير أو صباح الخير wherever you are at. Hello everyone, my name is Bassam Haddad. I am the host of Gaza على بالي, Gaza on my mind. This is the 12th episode of Gaza on my mind, and it will address Israel's mounting massacres and a view from London on the race riots and beyond. There is a plus on the flyer which speaks to the beyond, and we have remarkable guests with us who will address these matters. Raed Sadi from Gaza and Huda Ammori and Ibrahim Abul-Essad from London. Let me just say that in this 12th episode, we converse with Raed, who is a writer, and he can tell us more about himself, about the ever mounting viciousness of Israel's daily massacres and the silence or inaction of many states around the world, not least Arab states. We also discuss with researcher and activist Ibrahim Abul-Essad the legacy behind London's or England's recent race riots and their connection to Gaza. And we will, of course, talk with Huda about the Palestine Action group that has been actually quite active. There's a lot to talk about. I hope we can do justice to these topics in around an hour. Let me just say that this series is co-sponsored by the Gaza and Contexts Project, which includes 24 institutions collaborating and cooperating to produce the teach-ins, the various podcasts and conversations on students rising on in defense of economic freedom, as well as on this series, Gaza on My Mind. Now, a quick word about why we're doing this. After more than 10 months of Israel's genocidal campaign in Gaza, there is this expectation that we will go away somehow, that Gaza will no longer be atop our news and our preoccupation. This program, however, is here to say that we are not going anywhere. The conversation about Gaza must continue, and we will keep Gaza right front and center on the weekly every week. And we have been doing this every week for many months now, or certainly for 10 months. And this particular series is a free-form engagement on Gaza. Now, I would like to start with speaking with Raed Sadi, who is from Gaza. I never know exactly how to approach people from Gaza with questions that are mundane because of the depth of the calamity in Gaza. Nonetheless, Raed, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but I'll ask you first to share with us your journey since October, since early October. Let me say just a couple of words about Raed, and you could say more. Raed is a writer and activist from Gaza. He specializes in the field of communication and has quite a few writings that, if you'd like, you can share with us. But I'll leave the floor to you, Raed, to address your journey as you were in Gaza in October.
Thank you so much, Bassam, and thanks for everyone, for attending, for giving me the opportunity to speak my mind for the first time. I evacuated Gaza in April, which is months ago, and I've never been given the platform to speak my mind and share my stories, my feelings, and my thoughts. A lot has happened since October the 7th. Um, I know I'm not going to be able to cover everything. I'm not going to be able to share everything on my mind, but um, allow me to shock you with this. A lot of people were wondering, like, how did October the 7th happen and why did it happen out of nowhere? And I'm not going to get into that question. Do you condemn Hamas? Because I heard it too many times, actually. I actually was one of the few people who predicted a war in Gaza back then. And I'm saying this because I have some siblings abroad and they wanted to come to Gaza to visit. And my advice for them was to not to come to Gaza because I predicted an attack. The reason that is because of the action in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. We experienced something similar in 2021, And because I'm always following up with the news, everything that's happening in Jenin and Nablus and the rest of occupied Palestine, we knew at some point Gaza's gonna explode. Gaza's gotta attack. Gaza's gotta do something, because what's happening there is vicious, is inhumane, and it's always being done by the Israeli occupation. So October the 7th happened. I knew it was gonna happen, but I never imagined it would be this bad, to be honest. I live in Khan Yunis, and when I say I live in Khan Yunis and when I share my stories, I'm sharing this as a Palestinian civilian, as a Palestinian refugee who lived most of his life in Gaza. So, the attack usually starts in the north, and never have I ever imagined that one day I'm gonna have to leave my home, even if there is a ground invasion by the Israeli occupation forces. And it happened too fast in a way that I've got friends in the north, and they were telling me horrible stories. And, I knew most of them, I predicted most of them. Like when you talk about a fire belt, we've experienced this before. When you talk about these Israeli tanks approaching the borders, and there is the air forces, they're bombing everywhere in the north. I knew it was gonna happen, of course. But as soon as the genocide started, now this is something we never experienced before, not even in 1948. And things started to move too fast in a way that people are starting to leave their homes, and they started to leave the north, right? And at the beginning, they started to come to the south where I live. So I live in a small neighborhood. It's called El Amal, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. And we started to receive people who were displaced. And in just a matter of days, in weeks, we started to think that we're running out of resources and it's getting overcrowded. And that was still a few months in. That was still in 2023. Um, Never have I ever imagined that we would run out of food. Never have I ever imagined that the streets would be too crowded for me to walk in. Our neighborhood used to be empty, and I was at home, right? And we were helping people, at the beginning. I was helping out many people that I knew. They were family, they were friends, and sometimes if it's people that I don't even know, but because at the beginning of the genocide, we figured we're gonna get through this together. What happened later on, and talking about the end of the year, um, the Israeli forces started to invade Khan Yunis, my city, and many people started to evacuate. Many people started to leave, and at the beginning, I thought they're overreacting. They're not gonna get here, right? I'm in the center of Khan Yunis, and we refused to leave. And by we, I mean my family. I talked to my father, he's the head of the household, and we talked about it. We basically have nowhere else to go, right? The south is filled with people who were displaced from the north, and we don't have a tent, we don't have another home, we don't have even our relatives. Their homes are filled with people, and many of our neighbors started to leave, and we stood there. We decided to stay no matter what. We decided we're not going anywhere. And we got to this point where, it was the New Year's Eve, and then it was the beginning of 2024. And that's when the Israeli forces were so close to my home. The Israeli tanks were just a few streets away from my home. Now, my mother begged us, Yalla, let's leave. It's dangerous. My mother never feared for her life. She's faithful, she's a good Muslim, and she wouldn't mind al Shahada, basically. She feared for me, for my father to be arrested, and she feared for my little sister for anything to happen to her. Especially that we know the most moral army in the world, and we know what they do to Palestinian prisoners. Um, I remember this moment vividly when even though we rejected the reality, we refused to believe that we have to pack and we have to leave, and that's when we eventually, as Israeli tanks approached us, we left, right? And we hadn't packed everything. We left from one place to another. We evacuated multiple times. At the beginning, it was in Khan Yunis, right? And then we had to go to Rafah. And I experienced living in a tent for about 3 to 4 months. And you have no idea the things that we went through, especially that it was winter and it was so cold. And the situation in the south, it was tragic. It was catastrophic. uh, I don't want to take too much time because, as I told you, I'm not going to be able to cover everything. But for me to be able to survive, to evacuate the Gaza Strip, and to be able, to talk about what I witnessed, what I survived, is blessing basically, because I know there are 2 millions of my people are stuck in Gaza, including my brother, my 3 nephews in Khan Yunis, who've got nowhere else to go right now at the moment. So thank you, Bassam, for letting me share my journey briefly, and inshallah, I'm gonna get into more details now as I answer the rest of your questions.
Thanks to you, Raed, for joining us, and to everyone who from Gaza who has been joining us and giving us the time. We are the ones who actually are really desperate to hear from you all. I will get back to you with other questions, and I'm hoping that Huda and Ibrahim can feel free to converse with you as well. Um, and we're doing this particular episode after the dramatic upsurge. I shouldn't say dramatic, but an upsurge in the frequency and viciousness of massacres that have been perpetrated by Israel in Gaza and have claimed dozens and dozens of lives of children, as well as others. The images have been so horrific that Twitter has probably passed a kind of record in taking down various accounts and images and tweets, including mine, simply because we tweeted images of the effects of the genocide. So this is a an especially horrendous moment, and I'm not sure if there's anything special about it, given what has transpired in the past 10 months. So with that, we will zoom out a little bit to look at some of the really consequential action that has been taking place in London. We will address the race riots in just a little bit and their connection to Gaza, but I'd like to start with Huda Ammori, who is a UK based Iraqi Palestinian activist and a co founder of Palestine Action that has been making waves. And recently, there has been more than a dozen people from Palestine Action that have been imprisoned. So, Huda, without saying very much about your work, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have been doing? And we have been very interested in getting you on the show. So, we are very happy that you are with us on this program. It's not a show. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honoured to be speaking with you all. So Palestine Action actually launched 4 years ago in July 2020, and we launched it in a reaction to just immense frustration at the standard lobbying tactics and the traditional tactics that we were using to further the cause for Palestinian liberation in England, and getting the same response for MPs and feeling like we weren't necessarily advancing in the cause. It's never been more clear about how lobbied our politicians are by the Israel lobby, how much influence they have in this country, and that despite now with the current genocide, the case being as clear as it can ever be, the legal and moral case that we shouldn't be having links with Israel, and that we minimum cutting our stop sending arms to Israel. None of these sanctions have been put in place from Western governments, including Britain. And so, as in Palestine Action, we take direct action, which means rather than appealing to the government, we go straight to the source and we shut down Israeli weapons factories. We occupy the factories, we blockade the factories, and sometimes people go inside and smash the Israeli weapons inside of these factories which operate across England. Our main target is Elbit Systems. This is Israel's biggest weapons producer. And actually, they use Gaza as a laboratory to develop the weaponry. And they will market the drones, the bombs, and the weaponry that they use in Gaza as battle tested. And then they will try and sell it on to other governments across the world. And so we have Albert Systems in England, and this is our main target of our campaign. And so we've been targeting them for quite some time, for a few years, consistently with direct action. And we forced them to shut down 3 of their sites in England, including 2 of their big weapons factories. They have a few more left to go, but we plan on shutting down all of their factories. We know we've had a huge impact on Elbit Systems. They frequently meet with government ministers to complain about Palestine Action, and they're in a government report, Elbit, complaining of the detrimental impact that we are having to their company and to their presence in England. And, you know, for us in Palestine, when we take direct action, often people risk their liberty. They do actions knowing that the likelihood is that they will be arrested at the end of the action. And sometimes even people will go to prison. And this is a risk that we are willing to take because the sacrifices that we can make in England do not compare to what is happening to the Palestinian people. And we understand that every struggle requires sacrifice in order to succeed and in order to advance it. And if it means we will go to, you know, we'll be held in a police station, or in some cases held in prison, then people are willing to make take those steps in order to shut down the Israeli weapons trade. But what we are seeing recently is an escalation in state repression against Palestine Action. We had an action a few weeks ago. One of Elbit's sites, it was a relatively newly opened site, and it's a research and development centre that they have in a place called Filton in a city called Bristol in southwest of England. And this site was actually opened with the Israeli ambassador, and the CEO of Elbit came from Israel to come over to open this site. It's, as is most of Elbit's sites now, they are very heavily guarded because we have taken action against them so many times. So they increase security, which means they have to spend more on security costs, and they have less profits, and actually helps, brings us closer to costing them to the point that they can't operate. But this site is very heavily guarded. It's a newly built site. And as one of the first actions that was taken at the site a few weeks ago, several people drove a modified prison van into the building. They went through 2 security fences, drove the van into the building, got out and smashed the Israeli weapons inside. And what they found inside as well was the same quadcopter drones that we're seeing being used in Gaza. There was a report of drones mimicking the sounds of Palestinian women and children crying. And it was this drone sound that was used to lure Palestinians to kill Palestinians. And it's the same drones that we're seeing being used to do this and commit other war crimes against the Palestinians in Gaza were seen in that factory. And they managed to destroy some of those drones while they were inside. They were then arrested, and usually what happens in England is you expect to be held in a police station for 24 hours, 36 hours. You're charged, and then you either go to prison before trial or you get released on bail. And what happened in this case is that they used the Terrorism Act, counter-terrorism powers, to detain them without charge for an additional week in the police station, which is basically like solitary confinement. And they would interrogate them day after day after day, which is completely unprecedented in terms of these powers being used against activists in this way in England. They also rounded up other people across the country. They rounded up 4 others, so they took 10 people, arrested them, and all 10 are now in prison. Now, despite the fact that they used the terrorism powers to hold people without charge for so long, when they did charge them, they weren't charged with anything to do with terrorism. So it's blatantly just an abuse of power. And I feel like it seems like now the state is saying, we've tried other things. They've tried legislation against us. They've tried to make it difficult for us when it comes to making our case in trials. They've imprisoned people before as well, and it hasn't stopped us. So they keep trying to escalate what they do against Palestine Action to stop the movement. But they must realize that we will never stop as a movement against Albert systems, against the Israeli weapons trade, until we win. And that actually every time they ramp up measures and they use increasingly draconian measures against us, they are just showing us how desperate they are to stop us and how close we are to winning. Because Albert systems really, as long as Palestine Action continues, Albert systems days in this country and the Israeli weapons trade in this country is their days are numbered, and that's why they are ramping up things to try and stop us. But we refuse to be intimidated. When we see what's happening in Gaza, how can we even dream of being intimidated when we're seeing what's happening? But what is going on is the state on one side is trying to launch a PR campaign and saying we want a ceasefire in Gaza. They're making these hollow, empty calls for a ceasefire with no backing. They are saying, oh, we're considering stopping arms sales to Israel. It's been 10 months. Why are they still sending arms to Israel? They have the legal advice saying it's illegal. Everyone knows it's illegal to send arms to Israel. They keep doing it. And then on the other side, they're locking up the people who are taking direct action to actually abide by the legal and moral obligations that we as a country have. So this is the situation we're in. And then just more recently, a few days ago, we had 5 more activists sent to prison in Scotland after they occupied a weapons factory in Glasgow and cost the factory £1 million by occupying the site, which is, and they were sentenced to 12 months. They expected to have half in prison. But again, even this is quite a marked escalation in terms of using these types of sentences against people for these types of actions. But again, we won't stop until we are victorious.
Thanks, Huda. So these people are imprisoned for this many months, and this is a final, or are there appeals? And how? I mean, given that these actions are pretty daring and pretty dangerous, of course. How is the case argued within the British legal system?
So there we have 11 of the 16 prisoners are on what they call remand, which is when you are imprisoned awaiting a trial.
What's the word? Sorry.
Remand,
Remand.
REMAND.
Okay.
And that means that you are awaiting trial. You haven't been convicted. They've accused you of something, but you haven't actually been proven to be guilty. So 11 of them are in this situation where they're being imprisoned without being convicted. And 5 have been convicted and have been sentenced in Scotland. We often will make the legal case that our actions in English law, if you take action in order to save lives, then you have a legal defense to argue that you are actually that what you did was lawful and wasn't criminal. We argue that all of our actions are lawful because they are upholding international law. Now, we also argue that we're acting to prevent the greater crime, the crime being the war crimes these companies are committing in Gaza and in Palestine. And I would say that the legal case has never been stronger. We know that the Genocide Convention, that Britain is a party of, that they are obliged to prevent the commission of genocide and punish those responsible for it. We know that under the arms export laws, they're not even allowed to send arms if there's even a risk of it being used to violate international law. The International Court of Justice ruled in January that it is plausible Israel is committing genocide. So obviously these testaments. So they are committing crimes. So we are taking lawful action to uphold the law. And that is the case that we argue when we get to court. The issue is, for actions before October 7th, we had done a lot of direct action. And the first 2-3 years, we won nearly 90% of our cases. And then they changed the law. And what happened before they changed the law is the Israeli embassy lobbied the court system to base and discussed our court cases with the Israeli government. And then the law started to change, and they made it more difficult for us to argue our case in court. So this is a kind of like situation that we are facing. But again, we have won many cases still. Some we have not, because they don't allow people to make the arguments. It's really like potluck when it comes to the court system, as you can imagine, probably everywhere. Which judge are you going to get? Are they going to let you make the arguments, or will they silence you, which we've had in some court cases? And after the Israeli embassy's lobbying effect, and they're making it more difficult to argue on certain legal defences, more people are being silenced. But I would like to think that after October 7th, it would be much more difficult for the courts to justify silencing people and not allowing them to make these arguments when the legal case has never been stronger.
Well, I have like so many questions about Palestine Action, but let's and we'll come back to you, Huda. Ibrahim, I know that the race riots happened all over England, and you're in London, but I know that you also have a good handle on what has happened as well. I'm sure, Huda, and how it might connect to Gaza or to particular Israel supporters in Great Britain in this particular regard.
Yeah, first things first, I would just like to call out the fact that how dare you imprison actionists that are using their bodies to prevent a genocide, yet you are not arresting the perpetrators committing the genocide. And I think it's quite disgusting how genuinely you can have weapons being manufactured in this country, exported to Israel probably on the same day, for us to see the after effect the next day. So I salute not only Palestine Action, but I also salute the Palestinians in Gaza that are continuing to grab Zionism by the neck. So yeah, first point I think we must emphasize is that the mainstream media helped legitimize the violence, not only what we saw recently in Britain, but also the destruction that we are currently witnessing in Gaza by propagating these false narratives. How? By constantly forcing down a narrative that refugees are the ones responsible for the agony in society, when in actuality, working class Brits, I'm sure with working class Americans as well, have more in common with refugees than they ever do with the elite. So, what we have seen with the race riots is the legitimization of violence by the mainstream media, by the likes of GB News, as well as other mainstream media outlets. And we stand by it. Every time the media lies, a neighborhood in Gaza dies. But when we actually assess the facts from seeing the research that was done by the likes of Loki, that is 0.18% of the population of over 50 million people are refugees. So we saw misinformation on all fronts. We even saw Elon Musk comment on the race riots, which, like, in all actuality, I think he just needs to worry about his own affairs, which is usually exploiting another set of countries, which is very bad in itself. But you had everybody giving out misinformation, and then we saw people in working class communities mobilize and attack other communities on the basis of their religion, on the basis of the pigment of their skin, the color of their skin. And a lot of these actions were fueled initially by organizations such as the EDL and far right Islamophobes such as Tommy Robinson. And for those that are hearing this word for the first time, the EDL is an acronym for the English Defence League, one of the main fascist organizations that we have here in this country, that interestingly was set up with the help of Paul Ray. So Paul Ray helped co-found the EDL. Paul Ray also spied on the international solidarity movement. For those unaware, Rachel Corrie was part of the international solidarity movement, and Rachel Corrie was an American activist who was crushed to death by an Israeli bulldozer as she was defending a Palestinian village. So Paul Ray has a history of spying on pro-Palestinian movements, the same individual that started the EDL. And that information that he gathered was given to different surveillance agencies. More interestingly is that the EDL, again, one of the main organizations that help fan the flames and express Islamophobic rhetoric, and that refugees are bad and that we need to carry out some actions in society, were also registered on the company's house by a former Israeli soldier called Roberta Moore. There is a direct connection between the EDL as well as these pro-Israeli organizations, as the EDL always show up, and I say that as somebody that has organized protests where I'm actually seeing far-right Brits join Israeli demonstrations, and even myself, I've always questioned, like, where is the connection? But the fact of the matter is that how these race riots happened in the first place is because we constantly saw misinformation, and misinformation, false narratives being purported, not only about refugees, but also about the Palestinians in Gaza. And that helps legitimize the violence that we saw carried out. And these are the very same institutions, these are the very same companies that lied, for example, about the 40 beheaded babies, that lied constantly about these Israeli narratives, that platformed the Israeli military's narrative, questioning it, that ultimately led to the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian children, women, men, the elderly, as Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but across Palestine, have been indiscriminately targeted since October the 7th. The fact is that, echoing the words by Asata Shakur, nobody is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them. Nobody is going to teach you your true history, teach you your true heroes. If they know that knowledge, it will help set you free. And I stand by it that the communities that did mobilize and surround refugee centers, that attacked Black people, that attacked Muslim people, that attacked Arabs, if true education was taught to them in the sense that if we understood that who is the problem at play, being the ruling class, we will be united stronger than ever. And we will understand that who the true enemy is, which isn't refugees. If anything, it is the elite that is manipulating society in order to essentially maintain its power within society, whether that be economically or politically.
Ibrahim, I know that you have been involved also with a number of other, kinds of action, and I'm sure Huda is connected as well. Before we go back to Raed, can you tell us a little bit about what might be happening in London, England, broadly, regarding the new year, the new academic year, in terms of student action on campuses, for instance? Are we looking at a dip in that sort of vigor, or uh, like in the United States, for instance, are there plans to keep going and maybe even expand the scope and strategies and approaches to keeping Gaza centered and disclosing the effects of this genocide?
Well, as long as Israel's occupation remains not only with the atrocities that we're seeing in Gaza, but across Palestine, we would expect an intensification of actions. And I know I don't speak on behalf of Huda, but I stand by the fact that as long as Palestine remains under occupation, we are going to amplify the struggle here. We are going to use campuses as a front to hold these institutions accountable. We are going to continue to multiply our efforts because if not now, then when? I think majority of us are sick and tired of seeing bodies being found without heads. Um, and the fact of the matter is that I grew up in a generation, and I think many of us grew up in the generation where we witnessed the crimes not only in Palestine but in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Abu Gharibs and the Guantanamo Bays, and the lack of accountability that followed. And the fact of the matter is that petition people are no longer going to be petitioning a prime minister, for example, who he himself said that the uh, siege on Gaza was the cutting off electricity and cutting off water and cutting off food was viable under international law. This person calls himself a human rights lawyer. So I think the fact of the matter is that people are sick and tired of going down the parliamentarian route and carrying out forms of direct action and grabbing Zionism by the neck, whether it be at the institution or other forms of direct action, will continue to multiply.
I some yesterday. Well, let me just say that yesterday, last night, during the Democratic convention, and I'm sure you all have an equivalent in London, in England. But the way they were talking, specifically the candidate Kamala Harris, the way they were talking about fighting injustice at the same time that not only are we turning our eyes away from injustice, but we're actually arming and funding and pledged to continue funding the state that is actually perpetrating this quote unquote injustice, this genocide. So the level of disbelief that your you probably experience also in London is beyond, you know, it's way out of off the charts in the United States. Um, we're hoping to continue talking about at some point to talk about what's happening politically in both countries as well as Germany, because these are the three countries that seem specifically Germany and the US, that seem to be basically not stopping or not actually um, reversing course or even pausing. This is something that we'd like to have a separate discussion about. Um, Raed, I know that every single moment of your experience in Gaza was difficult. But can you tell us a little bit about what has been, in your experience, one of the or some of the most difficult things that you encountered while you were in Gaza?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back at my experience, encountering these really. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As I said, encountering these really tanks, I've never been close to one before. That was one of the most, uh, you know, hard and difficult things that I had to deal with, because I'm responsible for my family, for my parents, and for my little sister. And the decision to evacuate, that was something. But also living in a tent, because as I told you before, we had no place to go, so we had to buy a tent. It was really expensive, and we had to find a place for us to stay, which was a tough journey. As soon as we got a simple location in Rafah, we settled. But because my parents are old and they have chronic diseases, and we never received any kind of treatment, medical treatment, for their chronic diseases. And the fact that we had to sleep on the ground, and it's so cold, uh, to see my parents are in pain. And when I say pain, I mean severe pain. And they were basically almost crying because they can't deal with this pain, they can't handle it. um, I'm not gonna tell you about starvation, especially during Ramadan. I'm not gonna tell you about how hard it was to get water, whether that's to drink or for personal use or whatever. Um, I remember, and I still live this to this very day. Being disconnected with the people that I love, with the people that I care about. By that I mean my family, my friends, uh, and the fact that at any time you could hear the news of anyone being murdered. That's something that still haunts me to this very day. I should mention Rana Shper. She's a dear friend of mine. We had lost contact with Rana since last year, since I think November or December. And then we read the news, and during the genocide, there were always rumors, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, that she's been martyred. And you never know if you want to believe that or not. And I had to live this moment when I had to search for people that I know by name, for my friends, just to know if there's like any news on them or not, because they've completely disappeared. Like many of my friends till this very moment, I haven't heard back from them. And I would hate to jump into conclusion to assume that they've been murdered, because as we know, many people have been jailed by the Israeli troops, and no one talks about the Israeli no one talks about the Israeli action of a prisoner in jailing and taking Palestinian hostages from Gaza. I encountered some situations where I was so close to being bombed. Um, like I'll be going somewhere and then a building right next to me. This happened to me, and that's the closest that I've ever been to death. And as someone who lived his most of his life in Gaza, and I had to deal with depression, and there were many times where I thought death isn't the worst way to deal with my situation in Gaza, because I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, and I'm living in a prison. That was never my biggest concern, but my biggest concern was, what if I get injured? What if I get severely injured? And we know the health system in Gaza collapsed, and we know they bombed hospitals, and they even took doctors as hostages. So all of that combined, I lived some moments where I cried my eyes out, because some of my friends were martyred. And even one of my cousins. His name is Saeed. Saeed, he's younger than me, and Saeed was preparing to get engaged, and he was a young man full of life, and he was a good guy. He was obedient, and his mother was so proud of him, and she was so excited for his marriage. And then out of nowhere, one day we hear the news, the breaking news in the family, and then my mother's crying, and there is nothing that I could do for my mother. And then a few months later, my aunt, my mother's sister, she died because there was no medicine, and there is nothing that we could do for her. And this got me to think about leaving Gaza. The decision of leaving Gaza was one of the hardest ever, because I had opportunity to leave Gaza multiple times in the past few years, and I rejected this option because I wanted to stay with my parents to take good care of them. And I know I was unemployed for years. I was depressed and I was broke, and it was a terrible phase in my life. But I never thought I would leave Gaza this way. I knew it was going to happen at some point, but I never thought it's going to happen this way. um, you know, the decision of leaving Gaza, and by leaving Gaza, you're leaving friends behind, right? You're leaving family behind, and you're doing your best. Now, I was blessed that my little brother abroad, he managed to create a GoFundMe campaign, a crowdfunding campaign to get us the money to pay for the Hala company, $5,000 per person for us to leave. And then I still had the rest of the family. Now I was working so hard on evacuating my sister and her son and her husband, and I managed to do that. But at the same time, I failed to evacuate my brother. My brother right now in Khan Yunis, he's so depressed. He doesn't know what to do anymore. He had to evacuate to Rafah multiple times, and then he's back in Khan Yunis because of the Israeli ground invasion. And now at this point, there is nothing they could do for him, and I'm not always in touch with him, because he really gets online, because of he has to work. There is no internet, there is no power, there is nothing that he could do. And in my head, mentally, I'm dealing with this possibility that at any point I could hear bad news. At any point, in living in Gaza during the genocide had taught me many lessons. And we had felt, as cousins, we had felt many feelings, and one of them is, how is the world unable to stop a genocide in Gaza? We are in the year 2023, and then there was 2024, and we're seeing the world. At the beginning, we don't deny the action for Palestine, for Gaza. We admire and we respect and we appreciate all the protests, all the work of organizations like Pal Action and everyone, whether that's in the UK, whether that's in the USA, anywhere. Um, we've seen the people in London protesting like they've never protested before in huge numbers. And I have many friends who were sending me photos and videos, and that helped me a lot. But at the same time, we felt let down. We felt forgotten behind. We're left behind just a few months later, because at the beginning it felt like Gaza was a trend. Everyone's talking about that. It's cool to talk about Gaza. It's cool, especially if you are an influencer, to have the Palestinian flag, and to talk about some public figures even from Gaza. And then here we are almost a year later, and I'm looking at the people that I personally followed on social media, because I admire those people and I admire their bravery. And I had hope that these people are gonna keep up the good fight for Gaza, for justice, for life, for the Palestinians, for the kids. And right now I'm witnessing all of this, and I'm witnessing very few people are still in the field for Gaza. So people in Gaza, they're desperate. Like, you have no idea. Whenever we had to deal with the rumors there's a ceasefire, there's a potential ceasefire, people would celebrate, literally celebrate. They would yell and scream out of joy, because we knew at some point the genocide is gonna stop. And then we get smacked down, we fail, and we got disappointed too many times, to the point that people lost hope, to the point that people are wishing for death. And trust me when I tell you this, I wished for death, and my father wished for death, and my mother did that, and even my little sister, who's 14, 15 years old, she wished for death too. And now, as we had evacuated Gaza, I'm communicating with my people who are still there. They have no hope, and you have no idea, for you to be tortured, mentally, physically, on every level, while you are stuck in Gaza. There is no place you can go. You have to keep an eye, because from time to time you need to evacuate, you get displaced. And just the process of evacuating many times, to get all the stuff, to get your family, and you have to choose. You would think there are safe zones, there are safe roads, but they are not. So at any given moment, you get bombed, and as I told you, the worst is just to get injured, and to lose someone that you love. So I think there are too many things that we lived in Gaza horribly, unfortunately. But at the same time, eventually we know the genocide is gonna stop, and not only is Gaza gonna be free, but also there's Palestine,
Inshallah.
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 Do you,
If you
uh, before I go on, um, Huda or Ibrahim, do you have any questions for
yeah,
Raed, or would you want to
yeah,
connect?
it's actually it's been on my mind. When you predicted that this war was going to happen, and I agree, from 2021, we definitely saw a power dynamic shift where it wasn't Gaza being bombed, but we're seeing Al-Aqsa being attacked, and then Gaza is actually the one making the call. And when Gaza made the call, it was good to hear that Yemen picked up the phone, and so did Lebanon, and so did Iraq. Is this something that you envisage to happen with the axis of resistance? And it's a tough question, but many people in the UK, again, I don't know whether they was romanticized or because of what's happening, was like it's the war of liberation. And inshallah, I pray it is, but understanding that there are 5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, understanding what Jenin is going through Nablus, how do you feel that this is the worst of the war, or do you think it might get even more, it's hard to say, uh, the magnitude because of what's happening, but do you think once it goes to the West Bank, do you think, yeah, how do you see this war like planning out? And do you think it's ending anytime soon? Do you think it's going to shift to the West Bank, the settlers?
Yeah, unfortunately, we expected a different reaction from the West Bank and from many countries. Now, the acts of Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon, you have no idea how much it meant to us. It felt like a giant hug to us. It felt like we want to cry, because some people finally took action. However, the genuine action, I'm talking about the global action, as grateful as we are, for all the people who did everything they could, whether they donated, whether they went out to protest. Some people even quit their jobs, because of what's happening in Gaza, and because their work is associated with the genocide in Gaza. um, I think Gaza needed more. We needed a reaction to stop the genocide immediately. That unfortunately hasn't happened yet. And the more the genocide lasted, the more people started to get used to it and then accept and then ignore and all of that. As for the future, I predict a dark future for the West Bank, to be honest, because if you take a look at the war, at the attack in 2021, uh, Gaza attacked the Zionist state because of Sheikh al Jarrah and because of Jerusalem, because of Al Aqsa, and because of the rest of the West Bank. Now Gaza is not going to be able to attack. Gaza is not going to be able to defend because Gaza has lost the ability to defend itself in the first place. And if you look at Gaza, Gaza has been destroyed, completely destroyed. I think Gaza is out of action for at least 20 years to come. And because of that, unfortunately, people in the West Bank, they're gonna deal with viciousness by the Israeli occupation more than ever. We know since 1948, since the Nakba, basically, they've always been attacked on a daily basis in the West Bank, right? The Israeli occupation is built in illegal settlements. They're stealing more land. They're getting more people. Like every now and then even putting people in jail. We haven't forgot about Ahmad al-Manasr, and we haven't forgot about so many Palestinians. But now Gaza changed equation in 2021 in a way that Israel knows if it attacks, Palestinians, there is a response from Gaza, and we felt so proud of that because that's the time that shifted, our history as Palestinians. But now I think after this reoccupation is done with Gaza, I think no one's gonna do anything about their attacks, towards the West Bank, and you know, uh, it hurts me as a Palestinian to think of it this way. Uh, but I don't think this reoccupation is gonna get any merciful. It's not gonna get any humane. I think it's only gonna get worse, and I only feel bad because Gaza's done, and soon it's gonna be the West Bank, I think. And every time I remember what Trump said, he's been thinking about how to make the state of Israel, bigger. I fear also for Jordan, and I fear for Egypt, and for Syria and Lebanon as well. So
Thanks, both of you. Huda, you seem to be deep in thought.
I am. It's hard to comment or question. I mean, it's good to hear what you have to say, and it's infuriating because I can feel it too, even from England, that when it takes Gaza being bombed and people being killed for the attention to get onto Gaza, and then how long does that attention last for? And as campaigners, it's a constant fight to keep the pressure up. And even if some on social media it might not feel as intense, the support as it was right after October 7th, I think a lot has changed in terms of the narrative on Palestine, and also in terms of like what it feels like to be in a movement in England. The movements I think have never been stronger, and actually people in it are more determined than ever. And whenever there is when there's a first, when it gets all over the media at first, there's always going to be those people who will focus on it and then maybe look at other things. But then the actual core of people who stay on and keep fighting for Palestine has grown immensely. I wanted to let you know that that is going on. And honestly, like being in Palestine Action, we had done actions before October 7th, but after, the amount of people who are saying, look, I don't care if I get arrested, I don't care if I go to prison, I'm taking action. And that's only continuing to increase. So even if the big celebrities have moved on to the next hot topic, there is a lot of people who haven't, and I think that actually, the trade with Israel is very vulnerable with the West because of these things that are going on here.
Yeah, and for all of that, I just want to say thank you because personally, I've been following Pal Action for quite some years, and I'm friends with Loki, and there's no need to talk about Loki. Um, I also want to say that hopefully, even if this genocide ends, hopefully very very soon, I just hope people would still pay attention to Gaza because, as I said
Yeah.
before, Gaza has been destroyed and life there is going to be worse than ever. Like the infrastructure is gone, water's gone, internet is gone, power is gone, no infrastructure, no hospitals, no schools, no life at all and whatsoever. So I just really hope that Gaza, gets, I don't want to say attention, but I want to say gets treatment because it needs it, like more than ever. And hopefully, inshallah, in the future, I know we could be optimistic and say this is a liberation battle, whatever. But I think, for the next phase for the people in Gaza, they need to live, because for them to live is for them to be able to fight next, inshallah.
Inshallah. And I feel like we just need to always confront Zionism, because you would know better than me, but even seeing the amount of trucks, food aid trucks that are just waiting, and I understand that the world is ready. I feel like the population of Gaza would increase 3 times, if not more, if people would come and live there. And I speak for myself, I would definitely like, if I can, I would. As long as we can remove Zionism and its entrenchedness, as we can hear, like the involvement that they've done in terms of Palestine Action, in their efforts to stop their work, or even with the race riots and how they're fanning the flames. So, inshallah, once the Zionist occupation goes, not only on how it occupies Palestine, but also how it occupies these Western governments, so inshallah, we will rebuild.
Huda, I know that as Raed said, he's been following. I'm following. A lot of people are following. We read on the news the effects of what Pal Action is doing. And I know there's a branch in the United States. What have you noticed in terms of whether these actions have moved the needle? I know that they have. These actions have been a tremendous inspiration for people to recognize that yes, this is what it takes against the liberal, hypocritical, and ultimately, even if unintentionally, brutal position of people who are complaining about disruption, like with the campus protests, with street protests, and they have their own canon of arguments against these disruptions, as though people are complaining and protesting, something simple, where in reality people are protesting genocide, number one. Number two, which should be number one, a genocide that is actually supported by the countries within which these protests are taking place very directly, especially in the United States, far more so than Britain or Germany, because the government of the United States, this country, is supplying the methods by which children are being blown up, like literally blown up, to the point where it's no longer just a figure of speech. The pictures that have emerged in the past week, as you all have seen, are out of a Hollywood movie with special effects depicting blown up skulls of children. It's beyond horrific. I mean, if one of us, if their sister or daughter or young sister or daughter or son has a little scratch on their hand, we go crazy. So imagine. So the anger is not anger. The anger is a response to the barbarity and viciousness that is perpetrated by Israel and supported by the U.S. and Great Britain and Germany and others, of course. So within that sort of context, have you noticed, what is your take on whether the needle has moved, at least in London, Great Britain, on this question? the public opinion or public opinion policies. I know that there has been some changes in terms of government policy, but can you just tell us a little bit about that and whether what you're intending to do next?
Yeah, so in terms of the government, we have a new government, we have the Labour government. So same thing, different name, in my opinion, when it comes to the connection to Israel, except the Labour have to pretend to be a bit more liberal. And we've seen this and how it's manifested, because one of the things that happened recently, about a month ago, was the Jewish Chronicle, a very Zionist paper, wrote an article implying that there was some sort of behind the scenes arms embargo on Israel. And they claimed that civil servants had stopped allowing arms exports to be approved to go to Israel. This turned out not to be true. It wasn't an official arms embargo, but it went viral on social media saying that there's an arms embargo between the UK and Israel. Now, what was interesting about that was, one, the fact that the Zionist paper wanted to publish something like that, which was misleading and false, almost as if that they are trying to plant some stories in order to make people back off a bit and say, oh, there's some stuff, there's some movement, there's some things happening here. So the fact that that even happened in the first place, or was being discussed, is a step forward. But we do know that they have had legal advice for several months saying that the arms sales to Israel are illegal. And we also recently had a minister, I think he's called Mark Smith, resign from the Foreign Office because of the arms sales to Israel, which was quite a significant development. And he said that I refuse to be complicit in war crimes in Gaza. That, I have to say, is relatively significant, and also surprising that he was even in there in the first place, because he's only been in there probably a couple of months, because Labour hasn't been in there for very long. But there seems to be some understanding that they need to at least play up that they are looking at sanctioning Israel, which is some movement. But obviously, the whole, for us as the direct action movement, we also see the futility in these statements, and the fact that you just have to keep going and going and going and not buying what the government line is until the sanctions are in place and the trade is stopped. Then you cannot take their words for anything. In terms of the direct action, I'd say that every time we shut down one of these factories, it's a victory in a sense, or it's a step forward. Every minute they're shut down is a good thing. So most actions are aimed at the factories themselves, and we'll shut them down for a period of time. Sometimes people do lock-ons, blockades, they shut them down for the day. Sometimes people cause a lot of damage to the buildings. They shut down for a couple of weeks, even longer sometimes. They shut down for a month in order to do repairs to the building before they can continue production. All of these things cost them money. Whenever they are out of production, they cannot operate, they cannot fulfill the requirement, their orders. They have to discuss this with their customers and other people. Why are they constantly being late on the things that they're supposed to deliver? So we're causing them a lot of hassle in terms of delays and disruption to Elbit systems in general. But also, every time we take action, they spend more on security. And one of the factories, people went onto the roof several times. One of the actions, they took off the roof tiles with their bare hands because the security took their hammers from them. They ripped off the roof tiles. The roof was completely exposed, and then it rained, and everything inside the factory was, destroyed. And it was after this action that they closed down the site for 6 months. They rebuilt the whole thing. They put up security fences, etc., and then they had to close down. They had to close down the factory because they couldn't afford to keep running it, because the security costs became so much that the profits reduced by 75%, and it was no longer profitable for them to operate in that site. That was one of the factories. We've had similar cases in other places. So Elbit's portfolio is being reduced in England. And also, in addition to that, we have had a lot of companies pull out of working with Elbit. So part of our strategy is not just going after the factories and shutting them down and causing disruption to them, but going after the landlords, the suppliers, the investors, any company that works with these companies, we find out they are targeted. For example, there was an action at one of the factories in Kent. They produce the sights for the sniper rifles, and when people went inside, they found out about other suppliers working with that company. And so then they're able to go off to the other suppliers. And we have had several companies now cut links with Elbit Systems, refuse to work with them as a result. And also huge banks like Scotiabank, Canadian Bank, one of the largest foreign investors in Elbit, the largest foreign shareholder in Elbit Systems, used to invest 500 million, massively cut down their stake in investments in Elbit Systems in recent months, which caused a huge drop in Elbit's share price. So there is a significant move in that front. And even though Britain, let's say, isn't the main supplier of arms, you have the US and you have Germany, there is a political significance in Britain of their connection to Israel because of the Balfour Declaration, the history, and the present day, how they are seen in the world. So us shutting down the Israeli weapons trade, which is a manifestation of the Zionist regime, it is the apparatus of the Israeli military here in Britain. By shutting them down, not only are we disrupting the Israeli military, but we are sending a message that even if our government is complicit, the people of this country will not allow Israeli weapons companies to operate here. And not having Elbit Systems not be able to operate in a country like Britain, which Israel deems one of their strongest allies, is a huge political drawback for the Zionist regime. And that's what we want ultimately to happen and to be replicated in other places, that politically they lose out as well as practically they are unable to get the weapons. Just quickly, the other side of this is the fact that they use Gaza as a laboratory. And so not only do we need to look at the fact that they are sending arms to Israel, but countries are buying Israeli weapons that are tested on Palestinians first. And when you do this, they are encouraging the occupation to continue, they are making a profit from the genocide, and they're making it lucrative, and they're giving permission to continue the genocide by buying these weapons which are developed in Gaza and the Palestinian people. And so we also have to look at that side of things, and by tackling Elbit, we are also tackling the fact that they are buying Israeli weapons in this country.
Huda, there's the genocide that we are witnessing. There's the killing of people, the destruction, the starvation, the rape, the humiliation, the diseases that have been direct and indirect, outcome, and certainly not accidental. But then there's the people who are watching, and this is something that I'm interested in. So many of us are interested in. The people who are watching are either supporting the genocide or saying nothing about the genocide. And of course, there are those who are opposing it, but there's people who are supporting or are silent. But then there are the people who are not supportive of what Israel is doing, but they look at some of the actions that are taking place and they fault the actions, as I shared before. Can you tell me from your experience, even from parts of the quote unquote left, because the word left is, it's kind of like the word terrorism. It kind of doesn't mean anything anymore. But although it should mean something, as opposed to the word terrorism, where the complications are far more, problematic. Now, what do people tell you, or what have you heard about responses to the kinds of protests and activism that you or others are carrying out? What kind of arguments are brought to bear in terms of the inappropriateness of what you're doing, or do you not, or do you not experience that as we do in the United States?
Yeah, no, we have experienced it. I mean, we've experienced it since the start of Palestine Action. I think more and more the arguments are starting to lose weight as people are seeing what's happening in the genocide. You know, we've been criticized by people who are meant to be on side, saying that damaging property of Albert Systems was going too far. I mean, I cannot fathom these arguments really, or the logic behind it, right? That you support Palestine, but you don't want Elbit Systems, an Israeli weapons company who's built on the destruction of Palestine, to be harmed in any way. And the only appropriate way to deal with that is to stand outside, maybe block it now and again, but don't damage it. Because actually, because when people make those arguments, right, like they are concerned about the property of Elbit Systems, then in one sense you're saying you should stand by and let them do what they're doing, because that's the alternative, right? Or that's the, if you're the opposite of the argument, is to
That
say,
that's the
okay,
that's the civilized way to deal with
yeah,
genocide.
exactly. And this is the point, isn't it? When actually, I think there's so many, like, they try and put the campaigning tactics that are allowed in this certain box, and actually that in itself can be like controlled opposition, right? And you stay in this box no matter what happens, no matter how many Palestinians die, do not step outside of this box of what you are allowed to do. And that will all, and staying within that box lets them get away with the genocide. And that's why we have to break out of it. And I think that's one of the things with direct action. You know, beforehand, like I had done very different types of campaigning for Palestine beforehand, worked for mainstream organizations on Palestine. And when I took direct action, it was the most natural thing to do. You know, when I was personally on top of one of their factories in a village called Shenstone, and I had a hammer and I could smash this place up. And just by being on top of this building, this factory was shut down. It was the best place I could have been and could have done. And it felt like the most natural and correct thing to do. And actually, when I was there, I was shocked that it took me so long to get on top of that roof, you know, because what they are doing is so abnormal. It's so unnatural, you know, like it's in, and the, most people, if you saw somebody being hurt in the street or a child being hurt in the street, you would try and help that child and you push away the person harming them, or do what you can to intervene into that situation. And it's exactly the same principle when it comes to direct action. You know, if you see somebody behind a door being hurt, you'd bang down the door and you wouldn't care about the door. And it's the same principle when it comes to these factories. The damage to the property doesn't matter, it's invaluable. And it's something as well, we did, there was 20 actions against Barclays, which is a big bank, invests billions of pounds into arms companies who arm Israel, and they also hold shares in Elbit Systems. And you know, the same arguments come up about the kind of idea of protecting property. But actually, when people do that, you are reducing Palestinian lives down to the value of the property of a bank who completely disregards the lives and the people of Palestine. And, you know, to most people, one Palestinian life is worth more than every single one of Elbit's weapons factories in total. And to say one Palestinian life is worth the destruction of every single one of their factories. And I couldn't care less about their property. And I couldn't care less about the property of Barclays and the banks who invest in these companies. I care about the Palestinian people, the right for people to be liberated and not to be colonized, and not of those who are colonizing and profiting from it, and they reduce lives. These banks reduce Palestinian lives to a number on their balance sheet of how much profit they're going to get from those investments from the genocides. And by taking those types of actions, like you take against Barclays, we are making it an unattractive investment to invest in genocide, because it comes with an additional cost, and it comes with the cost of direct action, it comes with the cost of Palestine Action. We will make it very difficult to profit from the genocide, to the point where you are making a loss, and it's unattractive to invest in the genocide. Because ultimately, most of these corporations that are upholding and propping up the genocide only care about profit, and so we will speak to them in their language.
Yes, thanks for this, Huda. I mean, I've always believed that those of us who are supportive of social justice issues, when it comes to, frankly, brown people in general, certainly Arabs slash Muslims, we face like a double disadvantage. On the one hand, uh, profits matter more than people in the countries we live in. At least me and you and Ibrahim. Profits over people, property over people, right? So there's that dynamic. But the other dynamic is just as sinister and obnoxious and disgusting, and that is, there is a threshold where the people I'm referring to, and I'm talking about people around us, there's a threshold where these very people who are critical of disruption, civil disobedience, and damage to property that is being used to kill not just one or two or 10 or 100 or 1,000 human beings, but tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, and destroying lives altogether. There's a threshold where these same people that object to that can be surpassed if they believed that the human beings that are the victims are worthy. So the second disadvantage is that a lot of these people don't think and don't value Palestinian life like they would other lives. And that's why they are able to make those disgusting claims about disruption, about disobedience, whether it's presidents of universities, administrators at universities, or whether they're colleagues at universities, or whether they're ordinary people around you, your neighbors, your friends at work, and certainly the category of people in media and government. I mean, it's just unfathomable how these people can get away with what they're doing in a supposedly democratic polity. So there are two disadvantages, and I'm certain that you and Brahim have encountered this almost as much, if not more, than the question of property over people and profits over people, and that is the idea that the valuation of Palestinian life is so low that whenever you cross a supposed line via disobedience or activism, you're the problem, because it is not worth it to do this for Palestinians, even if they are opposed to Israel's massacres. And that dynamic is something that we should not forget, because these same people are going to be appalled when something else happens elsewhere. And we should not forget who these people are and what they said when they reacted to what's happening in Palestine. So I'm assuming you guys have the same, you encounter the same phenomenon in
Yeah,
London.
yeah, yeah, 100%. But we're even seeing Palestinian being used as a slur by the upcoming president of the United States, where they're saying, "Oh, he's acting as a Palestinian." So I feel what we constantly see is the dehumanization of not only Palestinians but Arabs and Muslims that legitimizes this violence. But in terms of, I just wanted to make a quick point in terms of people coming up, because I hear this a lot. The protests are not working. And I genuinely think if people paid more attention to direct action and targeting the arms factories as opposed to marching in a park, having 1 million people march throughout a park and disturbing the trees, I think we would see more success. And I think more, like, it really hurts me. Why am I disturbing the trees, marching in a park with 1.4 million people? What if that 1.4 million people were all transported to an Israeli arms factory 1 hour away from London? It would have been closed. We like, and I really think everybody watching this to learn more of the Israeli arms factories that are in your locality and to target the factories for. I say this as a Palestinian Egyptian that's witnessed too many war crimes across the global south, understanding that I feel that the petitioning route is an ineffective route, a necessary route, but when we understand the impact and the success of direct action, and the power of Palestine Action from Italy to America, I strongly believe when I constantly hear people coming up to me saying, and they come to every protest. It's not like they don't come. They come to every protest. They feel like they're changing by being at that protest, but honestly, they feel very low because they see the bodies without heads. And I reply back to them is that if we carried out this same type of energy, not in a park, but outside an arms factory, I truly believe that we would be much more effective. So to anybody watching this, regardless of your geography, I would definitely say to target the factories that literally create the weapons that are being exported to Gaza, to Israel, for them to use in Gaza the next day.
رائد، شو بتشعر بس تسمع هالحكي؟ how what do you feel when you hear these stories? I mean, how I don't know how your faith in humanity can be restored after watching people watching what's happening in Gaza and knowing full well what's going on, because people who are watching from the United States specifically, as well as probably Great Britain and Germany, they know what's happening, they know who's funding it, and they're okay with it or they're silent about it. I just can't imagine how your faith in humanity continues, because I've heard from so many people in Gaza, mostly privately, because a lot of people will not come on and talk publicly for many, many reasons, including questions of capacity and resources and so on. But Inta, where do you stand on this?
Uh, uh, okay, I think the right answer here would be I totally get what we in Gaza feel and think, because if you are there, you live in the action, right? And you're waiting for ceasefire deal at any second. You're wishing for, you're praying for it. So for it to never to happen until now, I mean, it's been almost a year. It's got to put you down. It's got to just make you feel like there is no hope left in this world. But personally, I've been connected with many, many people, whether that's in the UK or in the US, and I'm seeing those people like they're acting, they're doing something for us in Gaza. They're doing everything they can. And now that I'm blessed to be here in this live stream with Ibrahim and Huda and you, Bassam, I understand to people you're doing everything that you can. You're trying your best. I know you're not going to be able to get immediately to Gaza to end the genocide just like that. I know you're not troops, you're not militants, you don't have the magic, to just do your magic and just like that stop the genocide. So I think at some point we need to excuse the people in Gaza, because I honestly believe no matter what we feel, no matter what we think, no matter even how we act, I think we are excused for everything that we've been living, whether that's people who are in Gaza right now or for those who lived the genocide and evacuated. As I told you, we appreciate everything you guys have been doing, but we always get the feeling that it's not good enough. I mean, we appreciate it, but the outcome, the result that we wish for is for the genocide to stop. Because limited, okay, this is one of the reasons, of course. If you are in Gaza, at any second you could lose your son or your daughter, right? Or a family member. So it's gonna affect you. Now, if a ceasefire takes place right before you lose someone, and most of us have lost, right? But you don't want to lose more. So it's gonna affect you because you want it to happen as soon as possible. Because the longer the genocide takes on, the higher the possibility of you losing someone that you love. So as I told you, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for you're doing everything you can. So it's not on you. It's for us. It's on the leaders. It's us. For us, it's about or it's on those who are in charge those who are capable of acting, of doing something, but they're not. And it's also on those, and I'm not gonna name them, right? Because I'm not supposed to, because eventually I do want to get back to Gaza, but it's on those who are even not only helping Gaza, but like they're not helping Gaza at all, but they're also helping the Zionist state of Israel. So, uh, yeah, that's my answer, and I hope eventually we manage, as Ibrahim said earlier, to to get rid of Zionism not only in Palestine but also in the governments all around the world.
Can I
Thank
just
you,
say
everyone.
something?
Huda, please go ahead.
Just want to say that you don't have to thank us for doing this. It's our duty. It really is. That's how I see
100%.
it. I was so, I am Palestinian. My father's Palestinian. Grew up in grew up in this country. I didn't have to go through what you went through, and being here and having the links, it's our duty to take these types of actions. So you don't have to. You shouldn't thank anyone.
um I'm not sure. Okay, I totally get your point, but at the same time I always feel I feel the need to be grateful, because you can just go on with your life. I know it's going to be much less stressful for you and for your friends and for your family. I know you could easily live your life. You can go to Starbucks, you can go to KFC or McDonald's, and you could live happily. So you're not going to be able, so you don't have to deprive yourself of whatever other people enjoy. If like you don't want to deprive, for example, your children of McDonald's if they like that, or Coca-Cola or Pepsi, whatever. You don't have to boycott any brand, and you could just live peacefully and happy. You could be like, okay, I don't live in Gaza, so it's not affecting me, not directly anyways. And they got God, so what can I do? So this is the approach that many people decided to go on. Like, what can I do? There's nothing they could do, right? And many people, they're like, okay, I'm gonna tell you this short story. So there's this Instagrammer. She's American Egyptian. Her name is May. So her username is May's Fault. She's a comedian. I love her. I follow her. I enjoy her content. So her latest post was about how hard it is for mothers to entertain their kids, and she's been sarcastic and fun and all. So I had this comment, I wrote it down, and I said, imagine how hard it is for Palestinian mothers in Gaza to keep their children alive. So I commented this because I want people to pay attention to Gaza, and especially on from this perspective. As a mother, when you are unable to protect your child, right? May cares about Gaza and she cares about Palestine, and she talked about it many, many times. And I know she's being sincere, and I'm not against her living her life. But at the same time, I got this comment. It was a reply actually, that not everything has to be about Gaza. Like, not
No,
every.
no.
So I read the comment and I replied to it, and I said, well, simply didn't have to reply to me, but to me as a Palestinian from Gaza, everything is about Gaza at this point. And I could tell you about the things that I lived, when I evacuated, lived Gaza, and how much it hurt me when I saw many shops and places for McDonald's and KFC and Pepsi and Starbucks in Egypt, and I've seen they were filled with people. I know many people are boycotting, I know that, but at the same time, many people are not, and those people even brag about it online. They brag about it's not gonna do anything. And they decided that they cannot boycott a special brand, like specific brand, because, oh, I can't do it, I'm just used to it, it's just a part of my life now, it's a part of me, it's how I live. So if I boycott this cup of cola, I mean, it's not gonna save the kids in Gaza. So that's how they act. So for me, I've got to be grateful when I see someone boycotts, when I see someone acts, when I see someone who thinks of Gaza, someone who's hurt for Gaza. And I'm not gonna talk about this, on a Islamic
Mm.
level. I'm not gonna tell you that yes, you are gonna be paid, in Islamic, like, in Islamic perspectives and whatsoever. This is because of humanity now, right? And if it doesn't affect you, and if it doesn't change your life and how you live and how you act and everything, even you say, even things that you share on social media, I think you need to just think about yourself twice. Think about what you do, like who you are, like how do you live? I mean, we're 2024, and sorry, we're in 2024, yes, and we need to talk about what you need to act, like the simplest acts for a genocide in Gaza, and for what's next to happen in the West Bank. And in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt and the rest of the world, the rest of the Middle East specifically. So yeah, I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you so much.
No, but wallah, like it is a duty. And I think to what you're saying, and I stand by everybody in this chat, is that nobody will ever have McDonald's for the rest of their lives. It's the fact that in the West, I feel that there's such an individual focus of looking after ourselves that there isn't a community feel. And like you said, when you was in Khan Yunis in the beginning, you guys were letting people in that were coming from the north. There's this sense of a popular cradle in Palestine that honestly I don't think that exists here, at least growing up in London. And I say that where I had to witness my neighbors be burnt alive for 27 hours in the Grenfell Tower. That feeling of empathy doesn't really exist. It is a duty, it is a moral duty, regardless if you want to call us a Muslim, a Palestinian, or a human being. And to your point about social media, very small, I use social media since October to raise awareness and challenge Zionism. The fact of the matter is that given that you have platformed Palestine and you have built a platform of essentially a genocide, I think it's disgusting how tone deaf people are on social media, understanding that Palestinians from Gaza follow you and you are living your life and you're putting pictures on the beach and then you're just relaxing back into a normal life because this isn't a normal life. How dare I do that? There's Palestinians from Gaza that follow this person. There's Palestinians that want that normal life, that want. So I really think that if you were to act in this role and genuinely build a platform of a genocide and followers, you have an obligation to always never be tone deaf. And I think that is something that I find quite extremely fake on the social media dynamic. And it doesn't matter how much family or so it doesn't matter how far we are. I pray for your cousin, Allah Irhamu. I pray for your family that has been affected. The last time I was on this show, Bassam, I lost 30 family members. Now the number is 67. We have an obligation to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, not only just in Gaza, that is under Israeli occupation, and we will work our utmost effort to grab Zionism from the root cause. Because when you look at Britain, like Huda mentioned, Britain has an exceptional relationship historically with Israel. And even if we look at something Zaghir, very small, like the UJS, the Union of Jewish Students. The Union of Jewish Students was founded by Isaac Herzog's father. Isaac Herzog's the president of Israel. There is a clear direct connection between Zionism, Tommy Robinson, the EDL, United States, the DNC that we saw, where these politicians are genuinely sticking their fingers in their ears. It's disgusting, and it's not a thankful for us. We do not need no thanks. You guys are the ones that we thank because you guys are the warriors staring and keeping the Samud strong. And we pray that people in the West has an ounce of courage that the Palestinian people have.
Thank you,
I
Ibrahim. I was
appreciate
gonna
it.
ask you. I was gonna ask you to do like your version of last words, but I'm assuming these were yours. I'm gonna go to Huda before we finish with Raed. If you have any last words, because I kept you guys longer than I asked. It's usually an hour to 75 minutes, and then it goes to 90 minutes. But we're past 90 minutes. So Huda, do you have any final words with the knowledge that we would love to have you back at some point?
Yes, I would love to. No, I just want to thank you all. It was great to be on the space and to talk with you all today. And yeah, and I think just to bring it back to the topic, I wanted to just add that in one of our trials, our barrister, she's Palestinian, she's from Gaza, and she said that I can't recall the exact line, much by the way she said it, but about how saying that people are committing a crime by causing damage to Albert systems is a smokescreen of dehumanization. And I just wanted to bring it back to that, because I think what we saw from October 7th onwards in the West was a campaign to manufacture consent for the genocide. And we saw that happening in real time, the dehumanization of Palestinians, and it's something we have to constantly resist. And I also don't think you can look at the riots, the race riots and the Islamophobia without putting it in the context of the dehumanization that was done to the Palestinians to manufacture consent for a genocide. When you are that far gone into the dehumanizing a people, then obviously people are going to be racist towards Muslims in this country, and it is part of um, the same system of dehumanization. But at the end of the day, we do have power where we are, and wherever we are, we have to realize that and do what we can to add towards the fight for a free Palestine within our lifetime.
Thank you, Huda. I have a lot to say myself, based on what everyone has been sharing. You all have been, you know, so insightful and um, inspiring. So I thank you all. But before we close, I'd love to get Raed's last words. What might be your last words for this program, and what is it that you'd like to see that you haven't seen in terms of what people are doing worldwide? People, not governments. Governments, yani, it's gonna take a while,
Um,
including
I just want to
specifically Arab governments, للأسف, which are frankly, the most obnoxious and disgusting at this
yeah.
moment.
Well, first, I just want to thank you again, Bassam, for giving me the opportunity to talk and share. This is the first time that I actually speak publicly about anything that I experience in Gaza, and I know, when I'm talking to you, I had some thoughts and some stories that I was so ready to share with you, but as I'm talking, I'm getting these flashbacks. I forget that I'm right here, outside of Gaza. I forget about the camera and the laptop and everything, and I share things as if I'm living them, and I'm getting these mixed thoughts in my head. Like, was it all real? It feels like, like a nightmare, that can be happening. And at the same time, I understand I have too many things that I really want to say, but they're just rushing. I'm getting overwhelmed. I'm not sure if this is because, this is the first time in forever that I get online and, participate in a live stream, or I'm not sure if it's because, I've been affected mentally and psychologically by the genocide, and even physically right now. As I'm talking to you, I can feel it in my body still. Uh, I just want to share with the people one point that I said before is keep looking out for Gaza, because even once the genocide is over, that means it doesn't mean that Gaza is living. It means that Gaza needs more work than ever. Gaza needs life, just like that. I think people abroad, like worldwide, they've been doing a great job. I understand that this genocide particularly has changed the perspective on the Palestinian people worldwide, and I understand changed the game basically. Now everyone knows the truth because we managed to expose the Israeli crimes in Gaza. Um, just act for Gaza in a way that there are Palestinians who live in Gaza, and many of them are in Egypt, and those people are suffering silently, and no one's talking about them at all. And even those who manage to get into other countries, like the challenges that basically we face, understand that while I can handle myself and I can handle my family, understand many people don't have the ability to do that. And those people who are in Gaza, don't forget about those who need operations, surgeries, and any medical treatment. Don't forget about the students who need to graduate, or who need to continue their graduation, or those who need to work. Gaza now has no jobs. Gaza has no money. Gaza needs, as I said, life. So I think this is a long term, and it requires commitment. And I know it's not gonna be easy. The road is green, but we need to keep going till the end, because the people, everything that we went through in Gaza, it's really unbelievable. Like, no matter how many times that I talk, no matter how many details and how many stories that I share, those who didn't live what we lived, they're not going to be able to get the full experience. They're not going to be able to get the full feeling of experiencing genocide. And as a word for us, like I would say, not even liberation. Like the liberation of Palestine is not even enough for the people in Gaza for everything they've been going through since October the 7th, and even before that, the siege and the occupation, all of that. So yeah, we're grateful, and we hope that we just commit to the Palestinian issue, and inshallah, one day the Palestinian people worldwide, they'll be free and they will live peacefully, dignity, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you all. I don't have much to say, given we are really testing everyone's patience. So I'll end here. Thank you, Raed, for coming on, and everything you said and shared nourishes us a lot more than you think. And I know this from speaking to people who listen to people on this program who are speaking from Gaza, or who lived in Gaza or who are from Gaza, even people who are here in the States. Thanks, Huda, for uh, well, for being here, but much more for what you guys are doing. You can't believe how inspiring, in the true meaning of the word, it is, and it makes so many people feel inadequate when they watch what you guys are doing. And I know that these actions are so principled in terms of focusing on policies and property, not on harming individuals. Um, so that's been it's been really it's been really uh, an honor to have you all, and Ibrahim. I've connected with you in London when I visited, and you were instrumental in um, getting us here at Gaza and Context and myself to connect with lots of people in London during that visit, which coincided with the commemoration of the Nakba. Shukran. Thank you, Ibrahim, for joining us again. And I wish you all the best. And we're gonna be here next week, the week after. And if I'm not here, and if you guys are not here, millions of people will continue to be there. Uh, yeah. Thank you all so
Thank you.
much. Thanks to all who are watching. Thanks to everyone who's behind the scenes working on this. Gaza on my mind. We'll come back next week, potentially with a conversation similar to this, but that will address the situation in Paris and France. Hoping that things will align in terms of the people who are committed to join us. Shukran, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, Huda. Thanks, Ibrahim. Thanks, Laid. All power to you all.